The Indie Council is in session. Welcome. This is the place for the leading voices from across. Why is everyone laughing so much?
It's great.
You're just so
we're
sweet
having
and
fun.
cute. I love it.
Yeah. This feels so professional. No offense, Jill, but like Jenny has that. You know, we've seen Jenny's TikToks, right? We've all
It's
been
so
like,
fucking
"Ah, why don't I
professional.
sound
No
like
offense,
that?"
Jill.
Well, come on. I mean, you tell me you don't hear Jenny's TikToks, and you're not like, man, I wish I could do that.
I wish I
but
could have
can't.
that voice. Yeah. Go ahead, Jenny.
can't.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
We
Yeah.
apologize.
That's so funny.
Go.
This is a place for the leading voices from across the industry to gather and talk news, titles, and everything indie. I'm your current Master of Ceremonies, Jenny Wyndham, joining the council today and coming off of a WrestleMania-filled weekend is the wonderful Mike Towndra.
What a fantastic weekend, y'all. The tribal chief is down. His reign is over. My wife is furious. She hates Cody Rhodes, but hey, it's a new era in the WWE. It's a good time.
I'm happy for you.
Yeah.
Thank
I did not know that everyone was into wrestling until this past weekend. I'm not going to lie.
Yeah.
I was like, what is everyone talking about?
It's definitely the most popular it's been in a very long time.
Is WrestleMania y'all's Super Bowl? And I asked
Yes.
that because I know that wrestling runs deep in the gaming community. Like a lot of gamers like
Mhm.
wrestling. But I feel like I don't see, kind of like to Jenny's point, I don't see a lot of them necessarily post about it. This weekend, it was like that. I saw a lot of posts. So it's like, maybe
Something's
everyone gets out
happening.
of their seat once a
Yeah.
year. I don't know what the vibe is.
WrestleMania is kind of the season finale of like all the storylines that they build up throughout the year. So that's why like things popped off. Like The Undertaker came back and like this whole feud with The Rock was brewing for the past few months. Shit was wild. It was great. It was like the main event. Everybody was calling it WWE Endgame. It was great. Everybody came back. There was endless possibilities. Oh, a lot of screaming in the Towndra household.
I love it. Yeah, I'm a theater kid, and when you say story arcs, I'm just like, I should pay attention to this. a bit
Legit,
more.
WWE is just Broadway, but it hurts. It's fantastic. There's so much drama. Oh, highly recommend
Nice.
checking it out.
And coming off of the weekend with 4 less wisdom teeth, but looks like you're recovering smoothly, we have Janet Garcia.
Hello, thanks. I'm glad to be here. I did add an asterisk to smoothly as I did go to the ER yesterday, so it's not as smooth as I want it to be. I am allergic to one of the antibiotics, is what I found out. So
Okay.
Oh
That's
my
not
God.
the
found
way
that
you
out
wanna
at
find
midnight, and went over to the ER, horrified to think about what that bill's going to be. We'll report back later.
Oh my gosh.
It sounded expensive. I mean, they just gave me like an IV with 3 medications in it. But I'm like, every time they named it, like, then we're going to give you this. I was like, sounds expensive. I don't know. like, maybe I could just walk it off.
3-digit med. This sounds like a 4-digit medicine.
Yeah. Also, the Benadryl via IV hits different. I was high out of my mind for like 5
Zooted.
minutes. It was, I've never experienced anything like it. It was insane. So
What I
but I'm
wouldn't
good
give
now.
to have had a camera in
I
that room.
know. Oh my gosh.
I was
Jill.
laughing so hard, I was crying. I was trying to answer the questions, and I was just like, at one point, my eyeballs felt hot. Like well, I wouldn't say we're a family friendly show. We're like we're not antagonistic, but we're not like kid centric. If you've taken an edible before, you know the meme of like this edible ain't shit, and it's like, oh, the meme's like, oh, it's actually kicks in. Imagine if you took that and the effects were immediate, really strong, happening all at once, and you're the only one you're trying to answer like medical questions. Like it's just it's terrible.
Again, I would absolutely watch that.
Yeah.
Did I ever tell y'all my wisdom teeth story?
I want to hear it now.
Super quick.
Okay.
Got all my wisdom teeth out back in like high school or whatever. Got the shots, got the gas. I was just gone. I was on another plane of existence. They put me in the recovery room. The recovery room was smack in the middle of the lobby and the doctor's office. So while in the recovery room with the door wide open, I hear a little girl freaking out. She doesn't want to see the dentist. She's terrified, all that good stuff. She passes by me. I smile at her, and blood, it just pours out of my mouth. And she screams and jets out of the building. And me, still high like a goddamn kite, I'm very confused at why I scared this girl so badly. But yeah, that's my wisdom teeth story.
You basically were the games you play in that moment.
Yeah.
That was a foundation story for Mike.
That's a foundation story for that child.
For real.
That child definitely doesn't have teeth.
Down
definitely doesn't have teeth anymore.
Next episode, she's going to be on talking about her traumatic episode with Mike.
If you are that little girl listening to the Indie Council.
What a full circle moment for you if that's the case.
Yeah.
God, I wish.
And now that everyone said their horrific stories, I just want to point out I have all 4 of my wisdom teeth because they came in perfectly and straight and with no problems. And they're like, you can just keep them.
Oh,
I'm
must be
Jill,
nice.
and I'm so perfect.
I'm so
that
perfect.
My wisdom teeth fit in my mouth. That's lucky.
That's going on. That's a quote going on something.
And y'all are hearing the wonderful Jill, who is fresh off of a relaxing holiday, but feeling a little bit under the weather. You partied too hard.
Yeah, a little bit too hard there.
Too much Guinness.
So much Guinness. There was
Just
so
looking
That's
at
what
it,
they
it will
drink.
take you out.
That is what they drink over there. Mostly by my partner, who just had a great time experiencing all the Guinness that there was.
Any highlights from the trip for you besides the Guinness?
I mean, yeah.
To be clear, you went to Ireland.
We did.
And also, you don't drink, so you kind of
drink.
Yeah. So it wasn't quite as filled for me. I did taste a whiskey.
Okay.
It tastes the way rubbing alcohol smells. If anyone wants to know,
That
my
is
opinion on
true.
whiskey.
Yeah, that is true.
But the aftertaste was okay. Yeah, I went to Ireland because me and my spouse are celebrating 10 years married. Yay, us.
Yay.
Yay. I flew a hawk. Like, legit.
Wait.
Like a plane?
On my wrist with a bird flying
okay.
off into the distance. Like, I was hunting with a hawk. That was one of the very highlights of my trip.
I took that as
falconeer, basically.
I was falconeering, yeah.
Okay.
I took that
cool.
as Ireland has some giant ass hawks and you were flying on one.
That's exactly what happened, Mike.
Yeah.
I took it as it's like
Sick.
a code name for like some type of chopper, and you were like got in there, I guess. I don't know.
We all had such different images of Jill in our heads for that split second.
Damn.
Yeah.
I wonder if that just explains what everyone's image of me is mentally, what they immediately thought that meant.
This makes me wish I could draw fan art for that moment.
Anybody who wants to
somebody
show
listening.
fan art of me
We've been needing fan art.
talking,
If you have your
do.
talents and are willing to waste them on this trivial pursuit, I would appreciate it.
Yeah. So we've had a pretty exciting week because finally we've had a ramp up to the AAA showcase, and it finally happened. April 10th, 10 a.m. We all gathered around our, I guess, respective screens, and we got to see a bevy of game announcements and just trailer drops, world premieres. I'm curious, and we can start with Jill. What were some of the highlights or initial thoughts in watching this first ever AAA showcase?
Y'all, so we started like in our doc that we have in the background here. We started just by saying like highlights, and I realized as I was going through all the things, I'm like, I'm putting everything down. I should stop. I should go back and try to not put everything down. Of course, highlights for me, Darkest Dungeon 2. I love Red Hook. I love what they're doing. I knew they were involved, and I was excited to see they have a new free game mode called Kingdoms. It's coming sometime this year. I'm going to get back to the 2024 window, but it looks to be some kind of just like it's got the same combat, but it is a totally different like top-down sort of situation where you're going through and you shoot. Like, I'm not sure exactly how it's totally different, but I'm very excited for it, and I can't wait to see what's going on with it because I'm always going to be a Darkest Dungeon fan. But it did start for me a kind of trend of this 2024 window. Like, a lot of the things that were announced in here didn't get a very like narrow release window or a date, and I found that very interesting / like, give me my dates, y'all. One that did give me a date that I was watching for was Gestalt, Steam, and Cinder. I played this like years ago. I can't even remember when the first time I played this was. I love the demo when I walked away from it. It is a kind of Metroidvania. It's got long hair, redheaded main character, so of course I'm on board. And it's May 21st is when it is coming out. And then some things that I've obviously like just been keeping in mind: 33 Immortals, that's going to be real cool when it comes out. Closed beta is May 24th. I don't know if everybody can get involved with that, but go type that in, check it out if you can. Uh, I've written down Mouse, which is the sort of like first person shooter 30s animation thing. And I've written down here, still no date for me, Mike.
Full disclosure, Vicarious PR is representing Mouse and Kill Knight. And Mike speaking, both look rad. Unbiased opinion.
Yeah. And speaking of disclaimers, I think one more person probably has to shout one out.
Yes, I will have to disclose that I was part of, I represent Kepler Interactive, which works on Cat Quest 3, Flintlock, and Chia, which were also all part of the showcase.
Wow,
Great parts of the
overachiever.
showcase. Yeah.
Mike, since we
Hi.
called, oh,
No, I just said hi.
Oh, okay. I think I'm getting a little bit of weird lag from the Zencaster, so I don't know if I'm also missing conversation.
Now everyone's afraid to talk in case
Yeah.
Jenny doesn't know that we're talking.
Just roll with the
Okay,
punches.
go
We're
ahead,
good.
Jenny. You got this.
Okay. But Mike, I'm curious, did you have any highlights from the showcase that you wanted to call out?
I did not have time to watch the showcase today.
Oh, no.
But based on this list, I am very excited for 33 Immortals. Again, disclaimer, I am, we did some work on Kill Knight and Mouse, but those are two games I have been looking forward to. Well, Kill Knight is something brand new, but it looks sick. But beyond that, I am interested in Cataclysmo. I'm typically not that kind of strategy gamer, but there's something about Cataclysmo that looks quite intriguing. It might be the aesthetic, it might be some of the narrative stuff that they're messing around with.
Yeah.
So yeah, really intrigued by that. But no, I'm excited to go back and go through the list of games because yeah, I'm sure there's a lot of cool stuff that I don't know about. I'm also very excited that Vampire Survivors finally coming to PlayStation. I know 6-1 indie crew Kyle Stevenson has been patiently waiting for that to hit on PlayStation. So yeah, that was super sick to get that announcement. Also, just a shout out to Shadows of Doubt. We showed that on the 6-1 Indie Showcase back in March last year. And yeah, I'm just happy that more people get to see it, get to experience it.
Yeah, another one of those sometime this year.
Yeah,
but also it's coming to consoles, so I'm excited about that.
It's currently out in early access, so folks should go check it out.
Yeah,
it's real good.
Yeah, Cataclysmo is one that I was also very intrigued by. It stood out to me personally, and they do have a demo available. So if you're also interested, you can give that a try. I think there were like a small handful, maybe around 6 demos available as a result of the AAA showcase. So yeah, if you're a demo person, definitely go and find out which ones are there. Janet, any highlights for you when watching the showcase?
Yeah, I think for me, Never Alone 2 definitely is one that I, share with, I don't know who wrote down the doc,
I
but
did.
like I'm really excited for Never Alone 2. Never Alone 1, gosh, it came out so long ago. It came out in 2014. So it's been
really?
a big gap. Yeah, I had to look it up on
Holy
Steam
hell.
to refresh myself because I remember playing it like a long time ago. And it was a really cool game. It is like kind of looking into the culture and stories behind the, let me try to get this pronunciation correct, Inupiaq tribe, which is like an indigenous tribe in Alaska. So one really cool thing about Never Alone, if you're not familiar, is that besides being just sort of an adventure, a side scroller adventure, like some light platforming, it's like you and you have like a little fox. And it also like integrates just different elements of storytelling, and then it has kind of almost a almost like an annotation style. Like there's elements of interviews from people and like ways that they did like the cultural research. So this is very much like, I wouldn't call it, it is too far to call it an educational game because it is still just fundamentally like an adventure platformer, but it has a lot of sociological education elements that I think are really cool and really enhance what the experience of Never Alone was. So Never Alone 2 is the sequel to that. I believe it's still in the same tradition, like following the same tribe based on the Steam page. But yeah.
With Never Alone 1, I was surprised by 2014 because I think recently there was like a new edition of it in the past couple of years. I remember that edition. You mentioned like it's not exactly educational. It did get inducted, is not the correct term to use, but it is a part of some New York museum, and there's like an entire exhibit based around it, which I find super cool. So yeah, it's I'm glad they're getting a chance to expand on that narrative and expand on the history.
Something I didn't notice too is that apparently it's going to be co-op, and I believe the first one was single player, right? Or was it?
I think it was. I think it was single player.
I believe it was single player because it doesn't mention it on the Steam page. So yeah, definitely something that I felt with this showcase is it did go quite fast. It doesn't have like a host element. There was like 2 talking head moments, but that was kind of few and far between. So something that I kind of wish I saw more was just a little more clarity on like what's being sold, what are the key talking points kind of vibe. Because even Never Alone 2, a game that like I love that now franchise, but I only know it because I know Never Alone 1. And I feel like the secret sauce is so much of like the cultural integration, the co-op thing's new. Literally didn't know that until I just looked at the Steam page. Again, you're never going to get all the information out in any trailer or any showcase, but I do think if there's anything that I'd like to see moving forward is a little bit more clarity and like, what am I looking at here? I mean, sometimes they went straight into stuff. I'm like, is this DLC for something? Then they're like, and we're done. And I'm like, oh man, cool having like rapid fire is fun, but if you get lost in it, it kind of defeats the purpose, I think, a little bit.
I was doing a like live react on my Discord channel this morning, and there were moments when I was barely able to write the name of the game that was currently showing before the next thing came up. I'm like, I missed whatever whatever was trying to be shown for that last thing. Now I have to pivot to this one. Yeah, it was tough. Like, it's a good thing that there's some like good roundups out there you can go check out, because it's really cool to see indie showcases, like fully indie showcases. Obviously, we've had one very recently with the 6-1 Indie Showcase. Excellent job there. Great pacing, Mike. And we have amazing things to look forward to. Wholesome is obviously doing something in the summer. But we're getting more, and I love to see that. And we're getting a certain level. Obviously, this is called the Triple I for a specific reason. So we are getting those sorts of indies that people tend to talk about, and just getting all of these together. I can't imagine what it took to get everyone coordinated for this as well. That sounds it seems like it would have been a Herculean task.
Mike's getting flashbacks to his own showcase. It's like kind of like what does it take? One person can imagine.
Meanwhile, behind the scenes talking about pre-production for the next one already.
It's hard. I don't know. But yeah, no, I mean it's definitely like a lot to take on. And I'm sure, I always want to acknowledge that everything either has decisions or limitations. It's like maybe they couldn't get more of the thing, or maybe they decided just to have that. I'm sure there's thought behind all of these things, but just as a viewer, those are some of my kind of critiques of it. Other quick highlights: Cat Quest 3. Funnily enough, I never beat the other 2 Cat Quests, but like I know them. I've played a little, and when 3 got announced, I'm like, this is going to be the one I go all in on. I'm going to like get it and play it and have my little cat adventures. So like that's super fun. And yeah, those are probably like my top 2. But I will say, like, obviously Slay the Spire 2. Like, even though I didn't play 1, I think I'm gonna check that out because everyone stands Slay the Spire so aggressively, and like what a good time for Slay the Spire 2 coming off of Balatro was like my reaction on when we went over this on MinMax. It's like the doubters have become believers, and I say this as a fellow doubter, where it's like, hey, I'm kind of primed for some card times now because of Balatro. So obviously, what is that, the early access 2025, so still kind of out there in terms of capitalizing, but I do think surely that conversation is going to be kind of brought up. I think a lot of people will be almost drawing comparisons, even though they're very different games. But I think the idea of, hey, how easy is it to get into? How like interesting are the loops? Like, we're ready to have those conversations more than ever. So yeah, shout to Slay the Spire 2.
Yeah, and just to close out some of the other highlights, Never Alone 2, I'm super excited about that. I actually lived in Alaska. The area that I lived was primarily Inupiaq, and so it was amazing because I used that when I was a teacher.
That's
and
awesome.
So being able to like see now, oh my gosh, it's got a sequel coming out, and just as a teacher, I was so excited because there's a whole nother generation of kids that are going to play it and see themselves in these games. And they did a really good job of like bringing in elders and stuff. I just think it's amazing. You don't see that kind of like community input into the lore of a game and like sort of this cultural history being brought in.
Yeah.
Broken Roads was another one I was really excited to see. I've been keeping an eye on it. I actually don't even know how I knew about it. I think maybe just like an email came through a couple weeks ago, and I had gotten a code for it and was playing for a little bit, and I have been looking forward to just more narrative experiences, more like RPG. I think kind of going off of like Balatro priming people for Slay the Spire. I feel like Baldur's Gate has primed me personally to look for more of these like narrative RPG type experiences, and so Broken Roads really sits in that vein. It's wholly Australian. Like the voice actors are Australian, like the geography is Australian, the creatures you reach out to, it's like pretty amazing. And excited that they launched, and I think they dropped during the showcase, if I'm remembering correctly. So that was pretty cool. Now, Jill brought up a really interesting point, which is
Ooh,
this.
real fast before we get
Yeah.
to the hot topic of the
Yeah.
news,
Okay.
because I'm very excited to talk about this. I do also want to, like, in terms of showcase overview, toss out like
Mhm.
the things I liked about it, because I was like, oh, I didn't like this part. But
Yeah.
one thing I thought was really cool is how much they're trying to like lean into their own expertise in terms of highlighting, but also being cheeky with like what showcases are. Like, I thought it was really interesting.
Mhm.
If you this is never said this before. If you watch the countdown, because like
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
countdown's usually you just stare at it and you yell at Twitch chat like, "Is the audio okay?" And then no one answers until it's too late, and you're like, "Why didn't anyone tell me?" That's
Uh-huh.
usually what the countdown's for. But they had kind of like those side like splash things of like the little like
Like
jokes,
the
and also they're like
Sims.
start
God,
big,
so
end
funny.
big. So I was like, oh, are they really going to do that? And like, obviously, you can debate size, but I think with opening with Slay the Spire and closing with, gosh, what was the closer?
It was
I forgot
Prince of
now.
Persia.
Prince of Persia. Spoilers for 2 minutes from now.
Spoilers.
But yeah, like I thought that was just kind of interesting. And then I was looking at their socials too, and they had like a bingo card they put out. Again, bingo cards
Mhm.
aren't new. It's not like they invented bingo cards, but like just sort of them leading into the things the communities already do. A little bit. It's like, okay, cool. Like, it's kind of a little bit of a vibe. Also I wish they picked a different color because I associate that color with Playdate. So I think it's like, I'm like,
Yeah,
oh, like
yeah,
it's kind of like
yeah.
the Playdate yellow. Like, oh, I wish it was different, but it does look nice. But yeah,
Mhm.
the end.
Yeah. Yeah, I will say, I just to summarize thoughts on the showcase as a whole before we go into the hot debate. I do feel like it went really fast. I thought it was really interesting, and I don't know if it's just the makeup of the studios or just kind of where games are at currently and like what studios are focusing on, because it's like what people want. But the focus on like roguelites was really interesting. There was just a lot more of that genre, and I'm like, it feels very indie because that is often an indie genre, but I just thought it was also interesting thinking about the ratio of what kind of games were
Yeah.
being showcased. Um, I did love the little quips that were given throughout. And what I thought was super smart, although I went back and forth, honestly, on whether I liked it or not, was after nearly every trailer, they had a splash screen of like you were watching the what is
Mhm.
it, Triple I showcase. And
Yeah.
that was
Mhm.
an element where I was like, this is really good because as a first time showcase, you are being like talked to and subliminally messaged, not so subliminally messaged. You are going to remember what this showcase is.
Mhm.
As a viewer, I felt like it was a little bit like, okay, I get
Like
it.
a
Like
jump
I would
scare.
rather, yeah.
Yeah.
But I agree.
Like,
I'm kind of in between because it goes so fast that
right.
it's like almost a little disorienting, but at the same time, it's like it. Yeah, I think I liked it ultimately, but it was kind of
Yeah.
like a bit contentious in a way.
Yeah, it's like I think it was from again like me putting my marketing hat on. I'm like, that's really I think quite smart.
Mhm.
As a viewer, I went back and forth, but I think they did a really good job. And like I was lurking in a few chats just watching how people reacted to it. And I will say, like, it was fast paced, but people like I think people enjoyed that energy and feeling like they had to like keep up with the showcase almost.
Yeah.
And like I think people were getting really hyped. So that was cool. Just from the metrics, like it seemed like the visibility was really strong. Even when I was lurking in the YouTube before the showcase really started, they had like 10K or something like that, which is again really solid for a first time showcase that hasn't been vetted yet by folks. And I don't know what the final numbers will be, but I thought it was pretty cool.
Yeah.
I'm
I'm excited to see those final numbers. Yeah.
Me too. I'm really, really interested. There was one note though where they had a thing. It was like a question where it was like, "What was that one? Can anyone name the Metroidvania that has a bug that everyone's looking forward to?" And what I think that was the one area in which I was like, "Oh, I get the cheekiness, but the mentioning
But
or
you
hinting
can't
at
do it.
Silk
You can't
Song,
do it. No.
You
I
can't
would
do
have not recommended personally."
I think particularly the issue with that too is so many of their jokes were true. Like for instance, you talk about the rogue
Yes.
emphasis. When you go to the Triple I Initiative site and the countdown for the showcase, it says like may contain rogue likes or something like that, or rogue
Mhm.
games. And so it's like when you blur the line between like joking about truth and then just joking for like the lulz, it's like a little funky. And that definitely could have. I don't know if people had like a negative reaction to that. I didn't see that one. So also I think a lot of people missed a lot of those jokes
Yeah.
anyway. But yeah, I feel like that's not. I would not do that. I think that's very dangerous for sure.
Yeah, I think it's like getting close. It's like touching fire or like getting close to fire. I don't think I saw huge, and I don't know. I haven't followed it maybe since, but I saw some people in the chat notice it. I noticed it, and I was like, "Ooh, I don't think they would have Silk Song."
There's a
Yeah.
good number of comments on the video now
Oh,
that
there are?
people are
Okay.
not happy. Even just
Interesting.
like some friends, colleagues are like, "Are we getting Silk Song today?" And I didn't know what the hell they were talking about until this got brought up. But
Yeah. Which again, in the scheme of things, it's like it's a first time showcase, learning
you'll learn.
experience.
Yep.
Yeah.
Overall, I do think it was a really solid first showcase. I'm excited to see how they continue. But the question that arose for a lot of folks is like, well, like what is triple I? What does that mean? How is that indie? What defines triple I to double A to double I to all of these names that we've come up with for this category of indie. And so what I'm curious about is if we could maybe continue that discussion that we started way back in the very first episode of this podcast and dive a deep bit more deeply into what is indie, and how after watching the showcase we can further finesse maybe some of what we think is indie. Jill, because I know you were the one I think who kicked off
I
this
dropped this
discussion
bomb.
in
Yeah.
our Discord. I was wondering if you'd like to kick it off and sort of guide us through your thinking as you were thinking about this today.
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing. This question came up. The show ended with the Rogue Prince of Persia, which looks amazing. I'm very excited about it.
Same.
Done by the developers that have made the Castlevania DLC for Dead Cells. So I am very excited to feel that motion, and I know that they're a good studio. But this came up as a very practical question for me and my news editor, John Carson. Do we cover this? Because my website only covers indies. The Indie Informer is only about indie games, and the Rogue Prince of Persia is being made by Evil Empire. They're an indie developer. There's no question about that. But it is being published, for all I can tell, directly published by Ubisoft. And that's the question I had to toss into the group. I'm like, guys, is this an indie game? Like, Evil Empire started essentially the Triple I initiative. Like, this whole showcase is built around them going around and being like, hey, do you guys want to be involved with like a showcase? And they're sort of the tip of the spear as far as this whole initiative is concerned. So it's like, is the game that kicked off this entire showcase not actually indie? I, as you might have been able to tell, I am leaning at this point.
Keen observers.
Yeah. I am leaning towards no at this point. I had to like ask John to pivot away from covering it because I'm like, I'm just not sure at this point, and we need to hash this out. Of like, it is an indie developer. There's no question about that. But it is being published by a AAA like entity.
Sure.
And I am so curious as to what that means. Is that the new triple I, because before I used the word triple I to kind of talk about any indie game that was still to me indie, but was like in the larger sphere of things where like the mainstream would probably know of it. So like Stardew I had counted as this, uh
Mm.
like Silk Song would count in that triple I space for me. But
So like
now
popularity is triple I to you at the
sort
time.
of.
Okay.
Like, but at this point, is the triple I category being defined in this showcase as a sort of blend where it is a super gray question as to whether this is indie or not? And I find that very interesting because I know from past issues with like say Dave the Diver where you don't know exactly like, does this category give us a place to put indies that aren't exactly indies, or does it make it a little more difficult? So as far as this conversation goes, I am on team the Rogue Prince of Persia is not an indie. But obviously, we have another team of takers here who have a different view of things. So if y'all want to take it over, go for it.
Yeah, Janet, did you want to kick it off?
Sure. Yeah, I am on the right side of history. I stand with Jenny. Let the record show. No, I mean obviously it's like they're just categorizations. It's not that serious. But yeah, I think it's totally an indie. Like I did not even have a question about it. Several reasons. One, the classic pass the buck. It's an indie because it's in this indie showcase. We're done, you know. But obviously, sure, there's thought that goes into that. So let's dig deeper. It's just because it's public to me, independent, like an indie game. It's by an independently owned like team. Like the studio is independent. The publisher, I think, is neither here nor there. Obviously, like to me, the triple I definition has to do with the amount of budget, the scale and scope, maybe even the size of the team. So, funnily enough, like I wouldn't say like Stardew's a triple I would just say it's like a really popular indie game, like a kind of mainstreamed indie game, big deal indie game. But it's made by like a very, very it's like one person, right? Like I mean, and
Yeah.
the you know like sure other help or whatever, maybe contractors. I don't know the process of that, but yeah, like that's as small as it gets, even though it did happen to blow up. But yeah, like I think look at something like EA Originals, and sure, you're welcome to like say it's not an indie because it's published by a AAA publisher. But I think if you
So
do that, you throw out
I'm
EA
going to
Originals
step in
too.
on that one because EA Originals is not EA. EA created a
It is on the
program
Steam
in
page.
which it's just shortened down, but EA Originals is a program created to fund indies. So in my mind, the difference here is the fact that this is a fund that was created to help indie developers out, knowing that this was for indies. I think that it is punitive for us to say, if you're an indie, you don't get to be indie if you've got money.
Mike?
But that's a very different, like they have a different set of requirements and understandings for that program versus if EA had just straight up published. And we're talking about Unraveled here, I imagine is.
Yeah, any of them lost in
Unraveled
random. I pulled up a couple to see if the language maybe evolved over time, but Mike, you got some sauce ready to toss out there.
I have a lot of thoughts, and a lot of them make me angry.
Let's go.
There's a lot of nuance to this question, and it depends on the game. For this game in particular, a Prince of Persia IP that is being published by Ubisoft, I do not think it belongs in an indie showcase. And I think it sets, this is drastic sounding, but I think it sets a dangerous expectation of what triple I or what an indie is moving forward. I think it's kind of a slap in the face to end an indie prominent showcase, especially with the messaging that they had with a major IP that is Prince of Persia. And to be clear, I would feel the same way if like Cadence of Hyrule ended the showcase, for example. This should have been left to the Ubisoft showcase on June 10th and not a part of this. I think it's, yeah, there's a lot of nuance, like I said, IP, budget, publisher, whatever it may be. I would feel more comfortable or I would understand it more if an EA original ended this thing, because it is an original IP from a smaller studio, and not taking anything away from the studio. Like, small studio deserves all the love and all the praise and all the success. They deserve to work on this IP. I just think again, kind of a slap in the face to all the other indies to have like Prince of Persia being the end cap and be like the conversation starter when you think about the showcase.
I think that's an interesting area, which I have kind of two minds about, because there is a sort of fear that
Quick
I am.
amendment. To play devil's advocate, I think also ending it or including a Prince of Persia game to an indie showcase does get more eyes on the showcase itself, and in turn gets more eyes on the other indie games. So like, again, there's two minds of it, but for the sake of argument, I don't think Prince of Persia should have been in this show. If it was just the Rogue and an original IP, whatever, cool, great. But that's where I'm at.
Yeah. So another thing to kind of wrinkle in there is for me, on one side, it's really cool because I think that a lot of the way forward for some of these franchises that we're not seeing things from is to give that IP to indie developers and let them do their thing. Like, that is
100%.
so cool. I'm so down for that. I'm so ready for that.
I have no issue with that at all. Just again, to be
100%.
clear.
I love that. The other side of it, though, is we are seeing indies being used as perhaps let me try to rephrase. Ubisoft is making an indie, and it is not for no reason. Like, it is good PR for them. It is good word of mouth for them. I don't love the idea
They need
of
it too. Really
these
They
big
do need it.
corporations.
Ubisoft. I don't hate Ubisoft. It's just the culture does not
Yeah.
mess with Ubisoft very much. Go ahead.
So
Sorry.
the big corporations using indies as a sort of like, look at us, we're doing great, like sort of shield. Like, there's some of this conversation with Dave the Diver and Nexon. There's some of this conversation which we were just having with like Unraveled and EA, because obviously EA is another one of those, game makers that you have some questions about. So like, it is nearing, to me, sort of dangerous territory of thin ice that are these big developers, publishers using indie as a way to sort of make their money clean, like a sort of laundering
that's
situation.
an interest. There's like so many things brought up here.
Yep.
So
There's
a
a
couple
lot.
things.
There's a lot.
With
I do
my
feel.
oh yeah, sorry for the delay.
No, I was just gonna say I do think there is an element of like indies are cool. Like, there is like this certain air and aura and vibe that
We're
you
the
get with
coolest
indies.
people in this industry.
We are. We're the
Yeah.
coolest people here. And I think to an like, I agree, Jill, that AAA studios see that and they understand that. And there's an element of making like, how can we get in like the cool kids crew? Like, how can we get in where it's like raw and more organic and like real? There is an element of that. And I agree, and I share your concern about in what ways are these big companies and marketing sort of tools being used and adopting indie and like, I don't know if like almost greenwashing it in a way, but it's not that bad.
That's a good
for
word for
sure.
it.
But there is an element of like there's a sterilization of the term that's happening that I think is really interesting. I'll let Janet, you continue, but I think I totally agree with that point. I still feel though that there's an element of, especially the designation of triple I think that's for me the thing that's separating it from like there's indie and then there's like this new sort of category of triple I and then double A or triple A that I'm kind of wrestling with currently. And I think that's where I'm sitting.
Real quick to jump in on that, and then Janet, I swear again, I'll shut up. I think we
it's
all
so
have.
refreshing to have someone that's like, yeah, go for it. Like, please, by all means.
I think everybody has a different, because it is like a new term that has been getting thrown around probably in the past
Right.
year or so. I think we all have different definitions of what a triple I means. In my opinion, the way I always interpreted triple I was Devolver, Annapurna, folks like that. Which
Okay, yeah.
in my mind,
I feel
if
that.
the newest Annapurna joint closed this show, dope. That makes sense. I kind of expected it, to be honest, a Devolver or Annapurna thing. I thought we were going to get the the new Devolver games, the little guy, he goes into 2D and he goes into
Lucky
3D.
Squire.
That man, I thought we were gonna get the date for that.
That guy.
But yeah, all these games do make sense. Sorry, I smacked the microphone. All these games make sense to me in the terms of AAA, Darkest Dungeon, Vampire Survivors, Slay the Spire. That all makes sense. Prince of Persia, to me, that starts getting to like this AA category. Again, I wouldn't have an issue with it if Ubisoft on June 10th, which is the start of Next Fest, Ubisoft respectfully fuck off. On June 10th, they're like, hey, we got the indie studio behind Dead Cells to carry one of our IPs. We're excited to show you. That makes sense. That's what Nintendo did with Cadence of Hyrule. But yeah, again, just like it's just the IP thing being kind of shoehorned into an indie showcase that makes me feel icky about it. I don't know. But different opinions, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Also, I want to get in on Mike's getting in on Jenny's getting in. Janet, I'm gonna let you finish. But as far as the IP question is concerned, I'm so interested that you brought up Annapurna because Annapurna finished its recent showcase with its IP Blade Runner.
Yeah.
Which I would count as an indie. Not because the IP is the IP is obviously a mainstream thing, but like because Annapurna is making it and publishing it.
I think that gets into the weird thing of like,
so then could an
licensed
IP be indie, but then a studio can't be?
I think it's also the weird thing of like game IP versus
your boxes are tearing in half. Okay, this is like when you pack something.
Like for us, for example, like for 6-1, we showed
ripping
off
at the bottom and you're putting duct tape on it.
For 6-1, we showed off the Lost in Space game based on that's a 70s IP created by a single person studio that like got the license. They paid the licensing fee to use the name and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, I don't know. There's something about it being a video game. It feels like if New Blood was making a new Doom game, for example. Like, I don't know. There's just something about that like correlation between AAA game IP versus just entertainment IP.
Yeah, there's so many things that got brought up. I feel like the whether it should be in the showcase versus if it's categorized as an indie to me are two separate conversations because I think it depends on what your goal for that showcase is and what your vision for like your brand is. So I feel like it's kind of almost a separate thing. Like we can still get into that, but I feel like that's where I land on should it be there regardless of whether or not we think it's an indie or not. Yeah, categorically, I would still count them as indies for the same reason I count EA Originals. And I feel you, Jill, where you're like, oh, EA set out to like make this kind of subcategory, but they didn't create it. They didn't want to put an LLC on it. They didn't open a new business. They didn't know EA Originals. They probably own something that says EA Originals for legality purposes. But when I hit that Steam page and I click on EA, Sea of Solitude's right there with FIFA and whatever else they have. So whether or not like
real quick,
EA,
Sea of Solitude's a banger. Not enough people play that game.
Truth.
I didn't really like it, to be honest, but we'll get into that with the what is it, see, you're so Turner, you don't even know if you're talking about
that just made me so angry. I know. There's too many J's on this podcast.
Honestly, there are a lot. Like even I struggle with it as a fellow J. It's at the calls coming from inside the house. But so I feel like the idea of, oh, well, it's different because like if Ubisoft turn around tomorrow, which maybe it is different for you, it's valid. But if Ubisoft turn around tomorrow and said, we're making Ubisoft Originals, EA don't sue us. It's like, oh, now it's different. It's like, these are just, your budget's your budget. There's budget differentials even between studios. So I don't think it's about like, oh, well, we don't know EA Originals budget. It could be really big. It could be really small. Like, I feel like we don't have the insight. There's no law that says when you're a AAA publisher and you publish an indie, you're only allowed to give them $5,000 or $500,000 of like, like we don't know that. There is nothing behind that. So I feel like if we're trying to look at it from the financial benefit aspect, we can assume like, oh, EA must, and we kind of do feel that, right? They're like, oh yeah, they got to play out like, big money to do this, a lot of support. We don't really like know what's going on with it. So I feel like we can't really speak fully to that. So that's where I land with like that aspect. I think the bringing up though, AAA getting into indie as kind of like a greenwashing of indies, I think that's really interesting and kind of true. But ultimately, I feel like that's an example of doing the right things for the wrong reasons. At the end of the day, this is a business. Guess what? A lot of people in this industry, it's not, everyone loves games, right? But at the same time, not every single person that touches video games is like, I just love seeing the creativity unearthed from when the kids went. Some people do not give a fuck about that. They're here to get their money. These are investments. And, we can talk about the evils of that or whatever. But at the end of the day, even if you're the purest artist ever, if you're selling your art, you're dipping that toe in that capitalism. Like, that is just how it is. So I think we could easily look at other initiatives that people do and say, oh, well, you're just doing this for the clout. Xbox is just doing their indie thing for the good faith. I mean, Xbox is a company that's entire marketing scheme is built on, we're like the good guys. We love gamers. We love deals. We want to let you play anywhere. We don't mind sharing. Sony doesn't want, and why are they doing that? Guess what? It's not just because they really love the gamer. It's because they're trying to sell, but ultimately, like, you can still analyze those practices as whether or not they're good for the industry or not, even if, every move anyone makes, it is to line their pockets. Like, it is not just every now and then there's like a game that comes out where it's like, oh, it's not as financially prosperous, but like, if it didn't do well, they wouldn't do it. Like, there are very few companies that would do stuff straight up for the culture. They don't have to make money on it, because then they wouldn't be a company. They'd just be like, doing some things. So that's kind of where I land on like the why they're going in and if that matters. And then for Triple I, that part gets messy. For me, I think of Triple I as like bougie indies. And by that, I mean like you have a lot of money. So it's not just popularity. It's like money. Like you got like an element of, like, I think of Baldur's Gate 3 as like, oh, it's technically independent. Like that feels like it's in that Triple I. Like this is a very rich, stacked, like so stacked that if you notice, it didn't get nominated for like Indie of the Year, because we all kind of knew that it would be like sort of jank. So I don't know if there should be yet another category of like, if we want to separate Baldur's Gate from something like Prince of Persia or from Neveralone 2, those all seem like very different games with very different sensibilities, but at the same time, like the indie scene is also diverse, and that's kind of the point of it. I think there is a risk to wanting to maintain a purity that we ourselves made up. Like I think we think indie and we think a couple friends in a basement, and they never leave the basement. They actually like, they don't blow up, they don't become Apple, because when they become Apple, they're not indie anymore. So it's like, oh, like they're scrappy and they like love it and it's great and they're best friends, and then someone learned how to play the mandolin and now that they added to the game, like, and I love that stuff too. Like there's a lot of heart and great stuff in indie, but I think sometimes it's like we are quick to start drawing the line of like, oh, you got too good of a publishing deal. You got too successful. And now you're kind of in this separate area when ideally everyone would be like all sort of, I think, intermixed, which also brings up the question of like, is this showcase existing conceptually with like something like Triple I? One of the issues I think it kind of hit, it's kind of like anything when you separate stuff, like it's like the problems of like, if you look societally, like the idea of separate but equal, right? It's like that shit didn't work. And this is obviously, I'm not trying to draw complete comparisons to this and like sociological real issues that society faces, but it's tough because it's that classic thing of when you silo yourself, on one hand, you're creating a space for yourself and that's awesome. But on the other hand, the dream is like also for everyone to work well together and be able, like the dream is we don't need to have diversity initiatives because we have so much diversity that we've solved that problem. And until we've solved that problem, we create that separation. That's sort of why these things exist. This is sort of a separation within indie, which is interesting because the question is like, how does that serve and what is the goal? Is the idea that there's like the Triple I showcase and like, I'll just throw out Wholesome Direct. Sorry, Jenny, for the random pull, but Wholesome Direct. And it's like, oh, well, the Triple I showcase, it's not going to have the games from the Wholesome Direct. So now it's its own little silo. But then what's the goal of that? Is the goal that indie fans can kind of go where their taste is? Or is this actually like kind of worse for the indie scene? Because I do think one thing I noticed from the Triple I showcase is I feel like some people were more down to like, and I'm not going to lie, I don't watch every indie showcase. Like I miss stuff too. And I watched this, so the blood's on my hands as well. Like, but I feel like a lot of people were more down to watch this. And I feel like sometimes the conversations online are a little bit like, oh, well, I'm not going to watch this smaller, more homebrewed showcase because what's there? I don't know. Like probably some game about, again, sorry, just use the comment because you guys have the smaller showcases. It's like, I don't know, it's probably just collecting flowers or someone's mouth is bleeding. I don't know. Ooh, but like Prince of Persia, I'm gonna pop, and I'm not saying that you have to play every game or whatever, but there definitely is, I think, in mainstream coverage, and we've talked about this problem before, the feeling of an indie has to hit a certain level of quality to be discussed, while AAA can just exist and be discussed. Like, there's been so many times, and that's why I'm a big proponent of like being willing to drag an indie game if I don't like it, because I would do that for Far Cry. I can say what I think of Far Cry because I played it, but like, if you didn't like Flower Petal Collector, maybe don't bring it up because they're so small. Like this kid glove attitude, it's like half kid glove, half ignoring it until it's big enough to be a thing. Like it has to be so successful that it's like, oh, I guess we'll like, everyone's talking about it, so we have to play it. And again, coverage is coverage. That has capitalistic stuff too. I'm not shading people for not covering every game under the sun. We've talked about how it's impossible. But I do think this conversation begs some of those questions of, is it even good to almost silo these out? Because you do end up having, well, I'm going to look at like the prestige rich indies that have a maybe kind of in a sense a better chance of hitting like certain milestones versus the ones that are like, I don't know, like sort of random small things off Apple Arcade that less people care about. So yeah, I don't know. I don't know if that answered anything, but kind of just tried to throw a couple things out there.
You bring up a really good point about, this is tangential, but it made me think about how from the consumer level too, create like just the general creation of all these terms where we've got like AAA, AA, triple I, double I, single I, like indie. I think there's also an element of like almost like, what's the word? Like when you make something almost too academic and too analytical, and it's like,
Yeah.
I think there's power in creating definitions. We live in a society. We need to create categories to communicate and fully understand and talk to each other. But there's a degree to which I think when we're categorizing in this like hyper specific way, we may lose people who wouldn't have engaged in the first place because we are now creating something that's a bit more challenging for people to come into versus like indies as a blanket umbrella term where it's just like, hey, let's all enjoy like games that are not triple A, just indies, just alternative. And then I think it's interesting. I think it's needed to have some sort of categorization between like a single hobbyist dev who's posting on itch versus like a developer who's like, concerned ape. Like there is a difference, I think, but there's also, it's a balance, right? Like you were saying, there's a fine line and a seesaw that we have to kind of play with between categorizing, creating spaces, but not excluding and siloing. And I think that's just something that we're just going to have to continue to sort of ride together as an industry and be just aware of.
Yeah. And I think it's a struggle too, because it's obviously if we do the research, you can, Google, okay, what's the name of the studio? What's the studio about? But so much of it is like, you don't necessarily know at a glance either because all these games come out differently. Like I think back to, this is almost opening an even bigger can of worms, but there was a post on the Kind of Funny Reddit like a year or something ago about what is an indie, and somebody actually let me try to credit this person. The user Rick Kiefer, like ARIQ Kiefer, but fur is with a P and an H. That's not going to be hell to spell. I'm sorry. This was the best I could credit you. I don't know how to read your Reddit name. This was 5 months ago. They said, here's a flow chart to settle the debate they had on Gamescast about the same thing. And I don't think I'll walk you guys through because it's kind of long. I mean, I can if you want to, but it's like, oh, does it have a publisher? And you kind of go down this description. You go down this list, right? And you end up in things like India, Stardew, and Inscription. Then you have, at least this is their categorization. Double I, it's games like Thirsty Suitors and Cult of the Lamb because it's, I think for that one, I'm not gonna try to follow this slow chart live. Then the triple I, they had Baldur's Gate 3 and Kena Bridge of Spirits. Then they had single A, and they put Dave the Diver, Everybody's Golf. Double A, they put Pentiment and Rocket League. Triple A, they put Elden Ring and Tears of the Kingdom. So yeah, like, but the thing is, I think it's so hard to. It's going to take time for us to get, if we ever get there, to a place where we could define something as an industry as double I, just because I think language and academia, to Jenny's point, is always behind our lived reality, right? There are so many jobs that exist that don't have majors yet. That like stuff's always going to be a little behind. And also we have to like figure out what works. It's the same way like open world. I feel like that's very clearly defined in the modern era, but back in the PS2 era, it's like, oh, is Jak 2 an open world game? I think at the time a lot of people said it was. Now we would never say it's an open world game, but at the time we were kind of still figuring out what is the scope and scale of even this idea that we're trying to execute on. And I think indies have kind of gone the same way, where now there's so many more markets for it, whether it's via AAA publisher, whether it's through these powerhouse publishing places like Devolver, and it's, you know, trying to figure out like, it seems clear that the person in their basement on itch.io is different than the Baldur's Gate 3 people. But how do we label that in a way that can be, we can look at parameters and put them in buckets, and it isn't like, oh, well, like it counts here, but like, maybe not here. Why? Just a feeling, you know, and it's tough.
I think the ultimate determiner of indie that I've ever seen, that I will forever lean on for the rest of my life, came from Aggro Crab's Nick Kamen, who said, a game is an indie if the team can wake up one morning and just put sex in it. And
That's true.
And I think that is
yeah, you mentioned this before. Okay, well,
So,
I'm telling you right now,
we-
Unravel's not indie then, because ain't no way they could put that in there.
They
EA
could
would
put
just be
sex in
like,
it. They could put sex all up in it.
I don't know, maybe EA is
You missed that
more
one
loose
level.
than I thought they were. I don't know.
Yeah, can somebody draft a letter to Ubisoft and see
Yeah, I
if
was
this
gonna
prince
say
is fucking,
that's
you know?
just what we need
Yep.
to do.
And
It's like, would you be willing to? Yeah, I don't. I would love to. That's such a waste of interview time, but I would love to ask that about that.
It's only a waste if you believe it's a waste.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
that's
only
true.
a
You
waste
can
if
ask
you don't get a
anything.
good answer from it.
Yeah, just to kind of reiterate, I think for me the thing is like the AAA IP thing, because it sucks that like I would hate going forward, and again using an extreme example and using Wholesome as a reference, or as an example, I would hate for folks to come into Wholesome and expect an indie studio making the next Animal Crossing or something, you know. That's kind of where my
But see,
trepidation lies.
I feel like to contradict that, I
Please.
feel like Wholesome specifically, and maybe this is getting in the weeds, but like for Wholesome, because of the type of showcase we've curated, I would like genuinely, if we got an indie studio making the next Animal
Listen,
Crossing,
same.
that would be like so dope. And I feel like
Yeah, incredible.
it's one of those things where like if I felt like if I was at a studio, if I was an indie developer, we got this huge IP and suddenly we weren't called indie. And I know this is me also just now saying vibes, but I think as an indie developer, there is this credence, or I think we should take into account this element of like their development process is still going to be indie.
Totally.
Yeah.
You know, that it's messy.
God,
I don't
it's
have
so
an
messy.
answer,
There's
but
so much shit.
but
And
it's
that's the
something
thing,
that
like,
I think.
I hate the idea of, I get to a degree, like if you get bought out, right? It's like, hey, you
Right.
sold to whatever, you're not indie
Yeah.
anymore. But I hate the idea of, which I don't think either of you are suggesting this, but I hate the idea of being so successful, like you can't sit with us anymore kind of thing.
Oh,
It's like,
no,
oh,
no, no.
like you're
Yeah, no.
Yeah, no.
but it's, the line there is thinner than ideal, because it is hard to parse that
Mhm.
out. I think too with oh my gosh, with Wholesome Direct and like just that kind of idea in general, not even just Wholesome Direct specifically, but the idea of, oh, is the next indie going to make Animal Crossing? Like that's a level of I want Stardew only kind of thing. That's sort of just a I don't even know if we as an industry can fight against that, but it's definitely something I've noticed just online. And again, online it's like random like I don't know how much that is all of society, right? But one take I saw going around, I saw like on social media, like an indie game getting like dragged because like people didn't like it. They're like, oh, look, it looks ugly, whatever, right? Okay, sure. But some people were like, oh, you worked on this for 6 years. Well, Pal World was, like made it.
Yeah,
I don't know
it
how
was.
long Power took, but they're like basically what they were trying to say was Power World was an indie too, and they're like way better than your game. And first of all, I mean, there's a lot of flaws in that argument. It's like it's not a very relevant argument in general, but there is, I think, that feeling of there definitely seems to be a sector of the audience that sort of, I think, turns their nose up at games that don't hit the prestige that's in their mind, which I think is
100%.
silly because anyone can make a bad game. Like
Yeah.
I've played have played games that are like Nintendo published games, whatever, any publisher, and I've played
Metroid
indie
the
games
Other
that are
M.
much better than
Yep.
that. It's like not really and not just like the prestige ones that everyone knows, like
Mhm.
so yeah, I think it's a little it is silly, but I think unfortunately there is kind of like a fan divide sometimes too.
Oh,
And obviously
100%.
like, there's like, I think a lot of people listening to the show probably will like hit up kind of whatever, but like there's not a lot of people who are searching low to high on the eShop being like, let me find this hidden gem. But there are a lot of people who think, man, the eShop's full of garbage. Which, is there some garbage on there? Yes, probably, because it's the eShop. But like
Calculator.
Well, yeah, calculator probably. I was thinking that calculator, that game that's like the clock, and then it's like a
Santa
secret
tracker
clock. Like that kind of hits. But yeah, there's I think a lot of problems with different ways that I think sometimes categorizations can be made for like, we'll take all of the hot games and then we'll leave these other games in this thing, like I don't know. That happens, I think, unfortunately a lot in the industry from fans.
Yeah, just to reiterate, I don't have an issue with like, I'm so stoked that the dev got the chance to make a Prince of Persia game that fucking rules, and it's so sick. My trepidation comes with Ubisoft, a major publisher, dipping their toes into an indie showcase. That's like where I start feeling uncomfortable about it.
Right.
But again, stoked for the devs. They deserve it because that team is super talented and they rule.
I will say too, just to give a nod to y'all's side of the argument, when we like did the roundup on like min-max this week, like freaking a few hours ago, and it was like, oh, what are some things you like? And I'm like, the Rogue Prince of Persia. I know it's the most basic answer, and there's a reason I said it was a basic, obvious answer, because it's like, oh, the Ubisoft published game. Wow. Great pull, Jay. It's like, yeah, I know. It's like the big, like obvious freaking, you'll like this thing. It's like the least interesting pick from there. Again, no shade to the actual game, but just like it's the more prestigious kind of, in terms of the background of the publishing title. It's like a game where you know it and you don't know this game, and yet you look at it and you know it. It's like, yeah, that's clout. Like, so it is definitely like the cloutiest thing that was there, to y'all's point.
Yeah. Well, if anyone listening has insight, opinions, feel free, drop them in the YouTube comments if you're watching there. Let us know via Spotify. I think there's a way you can like let us know your thoughts via Spotify. Because we started this podcast with this debate. We continued it today, and I'm pretty sure we're going to address it probably in a couple months again in some form.
Ironically enough, Dave the Diver now available on PlayStation today.
There we go.
There you go.
All right, so let's move on to the topic of the show. This is definitely a heavier one, and one that's been going on for a little bit. I will preface it with, we'll be sure to link any resources in the show notes and show description, just to make sure if you find this heavy, you want resources, you can access them. Just take a look at the show notes.
And Jenny, before you go on, I want to pause you for a second.
For sure.
Is there anyone who wants to jump to this being next week's topic of the show?
I would
I would be cool with that, because I'm looking at, we're already at an hour, and I know that's usually
what I was thinking. Then we want to make sure we give this topic a very, very specific like look. So everybody, you got a little bit of taste of what we're gonna do next week.
Nice.
Sick. That means I don't have to edit. Hell yeah. Nope. It's done.
Perfect. All right. Well, then this takes us to what we've been playing. And I will say there was one game that I feel like, as we all listed it in the show notes, got way more intense than I ever thought it would. Let's start with the most intense listing. Jill, what was one of the first games that you talked about today when we were listing it out?
I don't know if mine is the most intense. I think there's other people who's more intense.
I don't know.
I'm not going to read it out because we're not quite kid friendly, but we're not totally trying to get away from kids being able to watch.
You started the episode with the F-bomb. It was you today.
Did I? Oops,
yeah.
Sorry. I have listed Botany Manor, and my enthusiasm for it, as listed in the doc, involves some cursing. Yeah, Botany Manor is so good. I unfortunately did not get my thoughts up on it as a review, which I really wanted to do. So I'll do my official Indie Informer review right here, right now. Botany Manor,
exclusive.
8.5.
Okay.
I think what I really wanted to go with the subtitle here was like, screw sexism. You know what I'm saying? Get out of here with this. I didn't expect the background narrative as it unfolded to catch me as hard as it did. Based on my subtitle, you might understand why, as a woman, I felt a certain way about it. But the basic idea here, if you've not heard about Botany Manor, you own a manor. It's like the 1900s, something around there. And you are going around and trying to do some research for various different plants. It is one of the most beautiful games ever created. I think when I was playing it, my attempt to explain the aesthetic was sort of like naturalistic impressionism. I'm like, those two things
Good
should not go
description.
together,
Yeah,
but that's
really
how
good.
it is. It is just beautiful. So it's just like having a little stroll in your life. If you need that sort of calm, relaxing, like gameplay, that's there. If you want a creative and interesting and ever-changing puzzle game, which isn't going to frustrate you, but is going to like charm you a little bit, like that's there too. If you want unfolding narrative that actually has some teeth to it, which I was not expecting, like that's there too. Like I started reading like if y'all like reading notes, you know, this is the game for you. So I started reading things that seemed like not particularly important to what was going on in the story at the game at that moment. Where I put it down and I'm like, I'm cursing at the person who sent this. I'm getting hit. I'm like, oh, you stole that. You stole that from her and pretended it was yours. That's not. I'm not cool with that. Like, I'm not. I'm going to finish this game for vengeance. I want to see what happens. And then
For
the ending of this
vengeance.
game was so satisfying because you get the vengeance at the end. Like, I don't think that's a spoiler, but and everything about it is like the puzzles are never the same twice. The Everything that happened was just so charming. I don't like using charming as a word for these kinds of cozier games, but it's just like it puts a smile on my face. I'm like, "Oh yeah, I'm going to attract this bird. I'm so excited to do that. Oh yeah, I'm going to walk on a lily pad. I can't wait. This is fantastic." And it it was well designed. I was never in question about what I was doing at any given time. Like, even though you start getting into, like, at the beginning, you have one flower and one set of, like, clues to help you figure out how to make this flower bloom. And you do it, and it's great, and woohoo, you've done it. As you go on, you get more and more, like, areas, and areas have more flowers. So, like, if you're going into, like, the orchard, now you've got, like, 3 different flowers that are included in this area with all the clues kind of intermingled, and now you have to figure out which clue goes to which flower. Um, I was never stumped, it was never frustrating, it was never, like, putting too much pressure on me to figure out what I needed to do and what flower needed to go where, but I did have a few moments where I was like, "Oh, yeah, I feel really smart that I figured out the sunset time and all the colors that go along with
Yeah.
the sunset."
Mhm.
Um, so yeah, I also think one of the things I talked to the developer last year. One of the things she talked about was inspiring this game was that she just really likes to go to these kind of old manors in England and kind of look around and get tours and that sort of thing. And I think there's so much of that in
Mm.
this game that didn't need to be, that are like folded into, like, the manor's history is now folded into some of the, like, things you need to unlock and puzzles you need to solve, and it's done so well so that you are learning about kind of the history of this place as well as how these flowers are growing. And I'm like, I didn't think any of this was gonna hit as hard as it did, but it totally did. And like, uh, Botany Manor, y'all should go be playing this right now.
Yeah, I was gonna say I absolutely loved it as well. I haven't finished it quite yet, but I think what I loved is that it gave me the vibe where, like, I almost felt like I was in The Witness, but if The Witness was like chill
Yeah.
and not like super, because sometimes when I played The Witness I'd be like, I'm getting so frustrated, I need to take a break. I didn't have to take a break in Botany Manor. It's just like if you get stumped by anything, which that does happen very rarely, you just walk around for a little bit and it kind of just sort of comes to you and you sort of know what's going to come next based on the context clues. I thought they did a really nice job. I almost wished personally it was a little bit tougher, that maybe the notes didn't so quickly give some of the hints away. I think it's perfect for the audience. I just personally like a little bit more of a challenge. But I've enjoyed every second I've played, and I'm probably going to finish it tonight. But yeah, Janet, you've played this as well.
Yeah. I also, Jill, am I correct? Because Jill, you played this previewed like a year ago or something, right? At
I
PAX, I'm
previewed
guessing.
this, yeah.
Did
Also,
the story
I want to point
change?
out that Janet's entry in the doc also has much cursing, and I
Yeah.
argued
Well, I got
perhaps
the-
more cursing than mine.
It's always exciting when we've all played the same game because
Yeah.
you know, behind the scenes stuff, we don't coordinate like what we've been playing. It's not like, oh, like everyone played it. It's just you just pull up and you're like, hey, what do you have? And sometimes you have a lot, and sometimes you have nothing, and then that's it. That's the show. So whenever it's like, oh, like all the stars aligned, except for Mike, but it's like, sorry, no one's head gets cut off in this botany game, Mike. Okay, still a really
Wait
good
till you
game
hear about
now.
Among Ashes.
Yeah, oh my god. Well, one thing I thought was interesting, and now I'm wondering if I'm like, if I have this right. I was looking at my preview article. Before, wasn't the story she was coming back home to refamiliarize herself with her research, and now it turned into she's doing research to send to get published? If you don't know this, Jill, it's
No,
also fine.
I think there always was an element of, because I remember the book, the sort of
Mhm.
the one of the first things you get in this game
Yeah.
is like a herbarium, which I have a copy of. Oh my gosh!
Oh, of the actual one, or just a
Yeah,
different?
because they sent.
Oh,
Oh, so cool.
I know.
Damn,
Isn't that
man,
cool,
I didn't get
everybody?
that.
Visual
Botany
people who
Manor.
are not seeing this visually.
Ask
It's
for my
got
address.
the actual like, it's blank, so I could put my own notes
like
in
a
there,
little
but I don't want
journal.
to mess it up.
That makes
But,
sense.
like-
I kind of wish I had this, but I get it's spoiled for the the solutions to the game.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess maybe I got that part. Maybe I like misinterpreted that because I
feel
remember like
there
playing.
was some messaging a little different, but I
Yes.
think the
Yeah.
general idea was this.
Yeah, the idea definitely was the same, but the reason that stood out to me is because I remember playing the preview and being like, I don't know, it's kind of weird that like she doesn't know the information. Like, does she have like amnesia? Like what? Like I just thought that was a little odd. And then when they
Yeah.
kind of reintroduced it here in this more emphasis of no, I'm just out here doing my work. I'm trying to get published. I'm doing extra work. I'm like, oh, that makes so much more sense. And I thought the story they had was very cool and very surprising because this easily could have been a game where it's like, I don't know, I'm just a botanist that like likes it. But like it's cool they added like an actual little plot of, you know, what is her life like in this field? What's it like to be a woman at this time? Like to a degree. I
Mhm.
mean, it's not like a perfect historical recreation, but it's kind of pulling in some of that element. And sort of what does that pursuit look like? I thought was really lovely. Yeah, I really, really like this game a lot. I too have not had time to write a review. I think I will actually write the review though, and I think I'm gonna give it a 3 out of 5 for good. I did debate the 4 out of 5 for great. Ultimately, this is a game I think is good that I really adore though. So I do think like I really encourage people to play this. It's really fun. I think what holds it back for me is besides the fact that I kind of do wish it was a little more intriguing with the puzzles slightly, even though not gonna lie, I got stuck sometimes. You know, I figured it out, but like one of the issues I had with the game was so you have this notebook where and Jill, I think you nailed the explanation. It's like you gather the clues, but you slot them in and then it like solidifies and there's like great little musical cues for like when you succeed, and that's awesome. I kind of wish they had a way to like reference those clues within the
Yes.
notebook because having
Yes.
to
Oh my
walk and I get
gosh.
the intention like having to so to give an example, like let's say you're in, you know, the orchard and it's like okay, you have 2 notes and a letter and maybe like a bottle, and those are your clues, and then you gather them and then you're trying to kind of put it all together. It might have something like, and again these are made up for sake of answer spoilers, oh you have to you know, mix milk and orange juice. Not again, fake things. It's like, oh, you and then but it needs to be like a certain ratio and it needs to be, you know, tilted in a certain way or something. You might end up having to like you're sitting there, you know what you need to do, but you're like, wait, how much was it? So I found myself actually taking my phone out and taking pictures of the docs to look at it. And the thing that I like, I talked about this also on MinMax. The thing that stuck out to me with that was I went to a lot of talks related to difficulty in video games, and I feel like the intended difficulty of Botany Manor is putting the clues together to know what the solution is, and the unintended difficulty that I do think is a negative is memorizing notes. And yeah, so I think that's the thing that like I wasn't in love with. But to echo what y'all said, yeah, the puzzles are great. I think too, this is a little bit of a slow burn. It's a short game. It's like a 4-hour to plus hour game. But chapter 1 is basically a really quick tutorial, and chapter 2 is like also just like a one plant. When you hit chapter 3, that's when the game really sings. So definitely, if I don't know if demos are out or if people buy it and try it, I would say at least get to chapter 3. And if by then you're like, you know what, I don't like it, then okay, yeah, you just don't like the game, and that's fair and fine. But when they really start to have those multiple plants, and then you're like really forced to do true deduction, that's when I think the notebook shined really well, where I did love that you slot the clues, you have to slot them right. And even if you're struggling with a puzzle, once you get the clues in the right spot, you can kind of, boom, okay, now I know I have all the pieces, I just have to put them together. I think what's cool about that too is it allows for player solutions to have different, like players to have different journeys on their way to the solution. Like I imagine that, the stuff I got stuck on, maybe Jenny knew and maybe vice versa. So like maybe I solved one plant before Jenny did, but like we both like finished the game. And I think that's really cool and fun. And it kind of reminds me of like the design ethos of Chance of Sonar. That's why I like that game so much.
Yep.
But this is still a much chiller puzzle game. Like to me, the joy of the puzzles is the feeling of executing it. And even though they are like pretty simple, you still do feel smart like putting it all together, like because it has just enough steps that you have to take that it's like, oh, okay, well, I know I need this certain, maybe chemical or something, or I know I'm gonna need to open this, but how do I open it? And then it's like you find that note where it's like, oh, like this is why they showed me like this aspect. I think they also do a great job of like, one thing I really like is that the clues you can slot are all like actual clues. And by that I mean you can read stuff that doesn't count as a clue, and they don't list that in clues. Like the game's not trying to like trip you up with like, oh, you have 5 slots and I gave you 12 clues. It's like the clues you have, they all fit into the slots you have. You just got to figure out what plant it goes to. And I think there's some really cool playfulness too with sometimes needing information that isn't technically a clue. So it's like, oh, well, I have the clues, but like I'm missing this thing. Well, let me go around the house and really, like, it really incentivizes that act of reading the text in the game without there being so much text that you're like, I don't want to read all this. It's too much. So I think they like do a lot of brilliant things in their design in that way. So yeah, this is like, while, I think a 3 out of 5 might imply like, oh, it's fine. Like I really, really enjoyed this game. I thought it was really fun. Again, Jill, I liked your shout outs of like the aspects of the games, like, and who this is like kind of for. But yeah, if you want a bespoke area, if you want some satisfying little puzzles, if you want to like wander around a little garden, like this is really fun, really chill. I always describe this as a chiller version of Escape Academy's botany section. Like the puzzles are less like gritty, but it's like got that energy, which is really fun. Yeah, I think they did a really good job with it. I feel really good about this. Having gone from like the preview from last year to this, it's like, oh man, like I was really looking forward to the game, and I played the game, and I really liked the game, and it's like, hell yeah. So Botany Manor, it's dope. It delivered. The hype was unlocked.
Yeah. Mike, you did not. Yeah, you did not play Botany Manor. What did you get up to this week?
So I would say the new hotness is an embargo that is lifting by the time you're listening to this is Among Ashes. I got to preview Among Ashes from Ratcliffe Games. I'm going to read the Steam description. Among Ashes is a terrifying first-person survival horror game. Your friend has sent you a link to a game that someone posted online, but as you play, you quickly realize that something is terribly wrong. Whatever you do, keep playing. The elevator pitch for this game, it's Emily is Away meets Resident Evil meets a first-person horror walking sim. So you start the game. Well, once you start a new game, it drops you into essentially a Doom clone, like a first-person boomer shooter. You're playing your way through it. You eventually get to a boss. The boss purposely kicks your ass, and all of a sudden, on the right side of your screen, a little IM, like an instant messenger AIM message pops up from your buddy Mark, just seeing like what you're doing and how things are going. And he sends you a link on AIM for this game called, I forgot what the game within the game is called, but it's essentially, it brings you to like a Reddit page of this solo indie developer talking about his inspirations behind the inspiration that he was drawn to with Resident Evil and Silent Hill and games like that, and notably specifically says the games Resident Evil, Silent Hill, which hopefully people don't throw lawsuits out there anywhere. I was like, yeah, I really like these kind of games and I wanted to make it. And so this is my attempt to make it a game. I just want to throw the download out there, play it for free. We'll love your feedback. And then like a couple spaces down says something along the lines of, I'm sorry, I'm so sorry, don't share it with your friends, blah, 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 blah.
No,
Like weird shift. And then it's just like Reddit comments of like, yeah, this is cool. Great game. I hope he's okay. He's okay. No worries. So you have to manually click download, and then Mark is like, oh, did you download it yet? And you're like, no, I'm downloading it right now. It's like, cool, well, just download it for me. I'm going to jump in. Like, cool, talk to you later. And yeah, it turns into this Resident Evil grungy PS1 survival horror game where you are going into a manor and the cops you were a police officer. You were called over because you heard screaming in this like giant mansion, which is very reminiscent of the Spencer mansion from Resident Evil. And you were just trying to solve a mystery of like what is going on. Not going to spoil much because there is currently a let's play of the preview on 61 Indie's website and youtube.com/61indie, but it goes places. It is horrifying. There are zombie ladies that are very vile. And yeah, it's a really great time. I'm very excited to play more of it. It is completely my jam. And I will say, when we got to pretty much the climax of the demo where there is like a pretty gnarly jump scare, your character, like the person you're playing the video game as, jumps back, like the camera goes back from the computer screen, and then at that point forward you could get up from your computer and explore the house that you are home alone on a dark rainy night.
Oh no.
And the window, like when you go in the hallway, like your window is open and there's glass on the floor, so you have to clean up the glass, and you're investigating the house to see like what's going on. It is gnarly. It is such like a breaking the fourth wall experience that I love so much. It's doing the inscription thing. That's probably the best compliment I could give it.
So we all played Manor games.
That's true.
Yeah. And I play Horror Game Simulator.
Oh,
it's
man.
great.
I do love a good breaking of the fourth wall, so I definitely will check this out. That sounds amazing.
Great. It's real great. I'm having a blast with it so far. Kyle and I both played it together. Just I was on sticks while he was just watching me play. I will say there was a point during the Let's Play. This monitor right here is darker than it should be. I couldn't see doors left and right, so I was getting quite lost. I was like, Kyle, you need to tell me where there's a door. You need to tell me where there's a portrait. We got real lost trying to solve the puzzle. You have to there was like a math problem at some point where you have to like count the number of whiskey glasses in the room, and then that like is a number for a padlock combination. It took us like a solid 15 minutes to understand that we mistook rum glasses for whiskey glasses. So it was a very entertaining part of the video. But aside from those little frustrations, like the vibe is impeccable. I love the fourth wall breaking thing. I love when games do the inscription thing. I am a sucker for that. So I'm really excited to play more. And it's a game that's set in the early 2000s. I think specifically 2001. So like it's that really cool nostalgic vibe as well of like you're a teenager, you're home alone, you got the house to yourself, it's rainy outside, shenanigans are afoot.
Mm-hmm. Dang.
So that's what I've been up to. And other things, but we'll get to it later.
Yeah, I was going to say, did you want to maybe highlight some of the ones that you also dabbled in as well throughout the week?
Yeah, an equally delightful, pleasant, wholesome game. Buckshot Roulette. Got to play the Steam version after playing the original itch.io version back like around the holidays. Buckshot Roulette puts you into a seedy nightclub, and you go into a back room where there is this mysterious figure that you are playing Russian roulette with, and it is this real gnarly, dingy, strategic game of trying to outwit your opponent. And you have to essentially survive and have him die. It is brutal. It is gnarly. But Aside from
that was a sanitized description is so telling.
Aside from the brutal, gnarly themes of the video game, I will say it sounds awful to put it like this. The Russian roulette mechanics are really intelligent and well designed. There are items you get to play around with.
Suicide's never been so smooth and done.
Put that on the box art.
We need some
my
merch
gosh.
at this.
Oh my gosh, yes. Good lines have really come out.
But yeah, like it's the AI is really brilliant. It never feels unfair. Like you never feel like when you know there is a live shot in the shotgun versus a blank shot, it's never automatically like, well, damn, I lost automatically. Clearly, like it is very fair. I love the idea of trying to keep up in your mind of like, because like each round you're presented with like a number of live shots and a number of blank shots. So throughout rounds you were saying like, okay, I started this round with 2 lives and 2 blanks. Okay, shot 1 live round. Okay, there's 1 live, there's 2 blanks. So it's like playing that probability game with yourself. And eventually it like implements items where you can like peek out what the next shell is. You could do double damage. You could gain health. It's gnarly. It's not for everybody, but it's a really great time if you want to call it great. Pepper Grinder, which I know we kind of touched on last week. I finally got to play through it. I beat it in 2 sittings. I love this goddamn game. Devolver did the Mario.
But a lot of people are like,
dude,
doesn't really hit that well. So I mean, that's not why I haven't played it, but I've been scared a little scared.
It's probably one of my favorite games of the year so far.
Hell yes.
Dang.
I think it feels super fluid. Like Devolver and that team set out to do a Mario, and they did a Mario with very unique mechanics with fluid momentum that feels great. I will say towards the end of the game, there is one particular level with a particular section where you are standing on top of a subway car and there are just waves of enemies at you. You are supposed to get a minigun or like a machine gun attachment, but like stupid ass me missed or dropped the machine gun way earlier on. So I was just trying to melee everybody. I sat on that goddamn section for a half hour before I decided to restart the level and try to figure out that like I could bring the gun to the subway and just mow everybody down. Aside from that, I thought it was a delightful.
Really violent, which Pepper Grinder is like a little,
pretty
violent.
A
little girl, right? Little girl,
and there's little goblin men. There's little goblins.
Yeah.
I tweeted at Devolver to see if like those little goblins were related to Volvi because there's a
they look very similar.
She also looks like she looks like Alex from Oxenfree.
Yeah, a little bit,
but in like little tiny form.
Yeah, little tiny form.
2D, little 2D, but you know what I mean.
You could customize hairs. You could customize outfits. There's a sticker book.
Oh my god!
Oh yeah,
right,
the sticker
we're
book
done now.
really
but
sold
before we
me.
get too cute, before we go too far in that direction, I want to say the intro screen to this is you like drilling up a big skull. So like,
yeah, but the skull looks friendly. Like it's about like the vibes, you know. Also,
the vibes.
Mike, I know you're already too busy. You have too much on your plate. But like, can you do like a spin-off, maybe like a TikTok series of like, because you know there's 6-1 indie, but do like Mike's fucked up House of Horrors, and it's just like you
absolutely.
like,
oh my God.
I could absolutely do that.
Hey, this, you know, like, and what I would love, this is just for me, really. This part's just for me. What I would love is for you to try to replicate Jenny's setup, but in like almost in the opposite. Like same tone, same vibe, and be like,
We should do that.
Today, what's up, guys? Like, you know, today we're looking at playing Russian roulette with the devil or whatever whatever
Like,
you got going on.
every time Jenny posts something like that, I'll stitch it and be like, thanks, Jenny. Anyway, here's Carcass from Dan McGrath.
That would be so good. And I would love more than anything if you guys, this is a lot of work. I would love if you guys could find foils of each other's games.
Yeah.
It's like with the same, like,
Mike,
a motif thread. And it's like the 2 sides of the coin.
There's an idea.
I love that.
There's something.
Yeah,
here.
there's something happening.
There's something here.
We'll
but also, Mike,
we'll
and I know I give you a lot of shit for your
credit there,
fucked up
Janet.
games. Yeah, man. If it's made, I'll be happy. That's more than enough. But I'll take the shout out though, you know, or cash, anything, whatever you feel is right, you know.
A tip of the hat.
Look, I know I give you a lot of shit for your weirdo games because every week you pull up here and you're like, I'm playing,
on a body.
Wisdom Tooth Surgeon or whatever.
Mouth washing.
Mouth washing. I will say, and I've said it before, I do almost always put your games on my wish list because at one point, again, they're good games, presumably. So one of these games gotta be good, right? Like I believe that in my core.
Speaking of good games,
they're just like they're a lot. It's like kind of a lot. Everything's always really scary and messed up and dark.
Listen,
but they're all on here. I got them all on here, and one day I'm gonna just run through it.
Speaking of good games with little freaks, let me tell you about Frog Monster, where he plays a frog with a little gun.
Well, this is also
Frog monster.
This actually looks really cute.
So Frog Monster, a voxel Metroidvania where with a bit of Soulsy elements to it, but primarily like a first-person shooter Metroidvania. Think Metroid Prime, where you play as pretty much Frankenstein's monster, but you're a frog with a gun, and you have to go out and hunt down all these other freaks of nature in this world. Really
Honestly,
delightful.
this
I'm only
does look really cute.
it looks
Yeah, it's really cute.
I'm super down.
It's
This
killer.
is actually
It's
a cute
killer.
game. Like, it doesn't.
Yeah.
It's not terrible.
The coolest thing about this is like the perks and skill system throughout the world. Since you are a little frog, you have a tongue, and you go lick up the little insects, like that.
Yep.
Each insect has a skill tied to it. So, for example, let's say there's like I eat up a butterfly, and the butterfly gives me the ability to reload quicker. Once I get one butterfly, I'm able to go to essentially what a bonfire is, but like a flower in this world. You go to the bonfire and kind of like customize your loadout, and you have certain slots to your loadouts to play around with your builds, and you may want to swap builds around depending on the boss. I'm currently fighting. If you go to the Steam page, you will see a tall mushroom. I'm currently fighting this mushroom bastard. Bane of my existence. So I'm trying to figure out the best combination, or maybe get back to him a little later. But so far, Frog Monster, delightful. And super quick, finally, not gruesome and weird or whatever. Yellow Taxi Go's Room is an absolute delight.
Hell yeah.
Yellow
She was
Taxi Go's
super
Room
fun.
is Mario 64 meets Crazy Taxi in certain moments. I've only played about an hour of it so far. There is a review on 60indie.com from Matt. Matt says it goes places. It is super meta. It is super wild. So I'm really excited to dig into it further. But Yellow Taxi Go's Room is fantastic so far.
Do you know how long that game is offhand?
I think Matt said he's put like 7 hours into it, just because he was
Okay.
like trying to get all the stars in this
The
game are
completionist
gears.
kind of thing,
Yeah,
yeah.
he was trying to get as many gears as possible. I think there's 250 gears. He got like 150 of them.
Yeah, because I'm pressed
so
for time, but I have this. I like the demo I played at the Mix a lot, so I have a code for that.
Yeah.
So like that and Pepper
So-
Grinder, because Pepper Grinder is also short-ish.
Pepper Grinder I beat in 2 settings. Like
Yeah.
I think my total time is 4 hours. And that was
but
like
that's-
as I was trying to like get all the, because there's like the gold coins that are similar to the green stars in
But
Mario.
also spoilers for the future. What I want to do, I think I also mentioned this on the show before, but I want to do like a long, like an all day stream, like an 8-hour kind of thing. And
Yeah.
I think that the title would be like Identity Theft, and it's me being all of you in different like time. Like I'll like start with Mike, and it's like I'm only
I
playing
love
Mike
it.
games, and I'm just like getting into the culture,
I'm watching
Yeah.
that.
I'll buy a beanie. I don't
Ma-
care.
My
Like,
mouth
Yeah.
are bleeding. Yeah.
yeah. So
Well, so you just got your wisdom teeth out.
though I will
perfect
say, Jill,
timing.
I don't know what I would do for you. Like you're like
Just put
what's
a red
your
string on your head.
well,
there
no,
you
but
go.
what's your lane? You don't. I feel like you're kind of doing everything.
That's
so I don't.
so-
I don't know if
yeah.
Yeah,
you
what's your
have, like,
Minami
a-
lane?
It's
Hey.
Nami Lane is great.
Hey.
That's the hard thing. It's like trying to get PR people to understand what games I'm going to play too. I can't explain it. It could be one of Mike's weirdo games to like Botany Manor,
Yeah, maybe I'll just go through the games you covered on the site and just
Go for it.
run down that or something. But yeah,
And of course, Carcass is on the list. Carcass has not been, hasn't launched yet. It's the same developer as Bad Flesh. Very excited for this game.
So excited.
will I understand this game if I haven't played Bad Flesh?
Well, you can play Bad Flesh right now if you want. I'll link it in our
Like
Discord.
at this moment.
Oh,
I'm
thanks.
like trying to think of a grotesque word just to like pretend name a game, and I can't even think of one. And Mike is just like warts and boils. The game, I don't know,
Yeah.
like bloody
Listen.
bodies.
Bad Flesh, a 5-minute feast. Look at that.
Is it really 5 minutes?
So good.
Yeah, play in 5 minutes.
That's pretty
Okay,
cool.
Janet.
Damn, no matter
Before
what
the end of
this
this episode, we need a review for
Cue up some
for
Bad
Bad
Flesh.
Flesh.
Yeah.
Here we go.
Well,
All right. Well,
it already went
Janet's
bad, so I can take my
playing.
time getting to it. You know.
Jill, you have a couple of games. I'm
do.
assuming it's not Bloody Carcass or
It's not
Bad
bloody
Flesh
Carcass,
or
Bad Flesh, Plague
Yeah.
of the Sins of Our Fathers or something.
yeah.
Um, actually, in that vein, I have played a little bit of Children of the Sun.
Yes.
It is very good. It is very messed up. Like, this is not a game you want to go into thinking it's going to be wholesome. You are you are straight up the bad guy. You are the demented murderer type shooter person who, for reasons that you find out like in the very beginning, I don't know what Mike is up to.
Don't worry
I'm
about
not
it. Keep
familiar
talking.
with
Folks
him.
who
It's
are
okay.
I don't know what
watching
he's
the
doing over there.
YouTube video, or for folks who are listening,
I think he's
Mike
gonna
is
run the
pulling up.
game. He's gonna legitimately play bad flesh.
Now we
I
got
think that's what
bad
it's called.
flesh.
Yeah. So yeah, Children of the Sun, you are essentially playing as the bullet of the shooter. So like you mark
Oh, yeah,
everybody,
fun,
you are
fun.
Yeah.
you're in like a very small section, and your character actually has a little perimeter that they run around, and you try to decide exactly where to shoot from. Once you hit a acceptable target, you can then tell the bullet to move to another acceptable target, trying to get everybody in the field completely dead. And then at the end, you get a leaderboard. Oh no!
It's okay. Keep
And
talking. You got this.
yeah, okay. I'm
It's
not
like the
looking at Mike's
TikTok-
screen.
I was literally thinking
TikTokification
that, Jay. The, like,
of our
where it's like
podcast.
This is
it's like
literally
it's like a politician on top and like Subway servers on the bottom, like just trying to.
anybody who is listening to this on podcasts, you should probably go watch the video version because there's a lot happening in this episode. Children of the Sun just came out on the 9th. Another like Botany Manor, and this came out at the same time. It was very weird whiplash to go back and forth between the two. The other one that popped up in early access today for the III Initiative Showcase, early access, Laysara Summit Kingdom. It is a city builder where I really loved all of the story stuff that you didn't get to see kind of in the first preview of this game, where so beautiful, hand painted. You are in a situation where the whole world is sort of covered in this mist, and it's getting people sick, and it's making crops not grow, and animals can't produce milk and things. So you're moving, you and all your village, up to the top of mountains so that you can actually live and thrive and survive away from the mist that is collecting down below. It's a city builder. It, as far as city builders go, like, it is a very recognizable pattern of build the houses for the workers who can then work on the things, who can build the other things, and who need to be, given milk and eggs in order to be happy, so you can upgrade them so they can so if that is your jam, if that's the kind of thing that you work on, then check that out. I haven't yet gotten to the point where like an avalanche hits me, but I know it's coming. Okay, I'm ready for it. Like, get out of here with these dumb avalanches. I'm building, like, I'm so proud of my little like structures and like all the nice, neat little places I'm putting all my neighborhoods and stuff. I'll be devastated if something takes them out. So
Yeah. I also hopped into Laysara. I think what I love is just a beautiful game. Like, I think with city builders and like these kind of sim sort of building games, I have to be so invested in like sort of the aesthetic of it, and I think this is just really beautiful. It has this sort of like, I don't know, like almost like it's like Nepal, almost like a Nepalese sort of feel to it that I think is just cool. I don't feel like I've seen it before, so that's just really interesting. And I love how I sometimes get overwhelmed when you get these like wide swaths of land in these builders, and you're just like, build a city, and you're like, okay, I have so much room to spread out. I kind of don't know what to do or where to build. And the fact that you're building more vertically, like there's sort of these more narrower strips of land you're working with, and the fact that you're going upwards is just, for whatever reason, my brain really likes it. So I've only played about 40 minutes, but really enjoyed it.
yeah, there's also a really fun mechanic for this one that I haven't seen in any other city builder, which I really, really love. If you click on a building, there is an option to just move it. So like, you don't run into that situation where you're like, oh, I was building in the beginning with this idea and I had to change it all of a sudden because I didn't know I needed this next to this. Now I can just move it out of the way. And I'm like, that's perfect. 100%. Everyone should have that mechanic.
Definitely agree. And then for me, I, in addition to playing Botany Manor, which is great, I played some Biomorph, which one Mike Toundro sent me a key, so thank you. High five.
Full disclosure, I am doing the PR for Biomorph. I am going to be silent.
I will say I haven't spent a ton of time with it, maybe about an hour, but I was really pleasantly surprised. I had not really seen a lot about Biomorph beforehand. And I just kind of jumped in because I was like, I really love Metroidvanias. I think the art style looks really cool in this game. It's got this very like cartoony stylized look. Let's just see what's going on in here. It was really pleasantly surprising. So the premise is this dark Metroidvania, and as you battle creatures and defeat them, you can essentially like turn into them. I don't know if you're like actually exactly wearing their skin. I think that the term in the game is you biomorph. But in my head, I was like, man, it feels almost like we're wearing their skin a little bit. But it's really fun. I think systemically, the idea of being able to defeat something, take on its powers, really quickly shapeshift. I was surprised at how smooth that felt and how natural it was to adopt like this form, use the skill, switch back out. You use it in a boss battle very early on. That's really satisfying. Just to be able to say, hey, this type of form that you can adopt hits stronger. So, like, leave that there, hit really hard, swoop out, dodge. Really fun. There is this like story that I'm just now starting to scratch the surface of. It looks like your partner has been trapped in this stasis. You are trying to figure out how to save them, and it looks like also the civilization has something that's destroyed it. You're trying to rebuild the city. I'm a little bit loose on the story at the moment. I've just focused on like getting my bearings within the game itself, but it feels really, really good. And there's a surprising amount of cutscenes. I don't know if it's just because I'm at the beginning, but I was really impressed with the way the game segued from like me being in action to all of a sudden like we're about to attack a boss or an enemy. There's like a little bit of a cutscene, and it just feels like I'm sort of dynamically in this cartoon, which was really great. So if you're itching for a Metroidvania, so far the beginning feels as just a sort of comparison, a little bit more friendly to users who haven't played Metroidvanias than like Hollow Knight. So if you're like wanting to dabble into this genre, I also think this would, for now, at least how I've played so far, it feels like a really good accessible point to hop in. Don't know what will happen later and how it'll build, but I'm really excited to continue kind of play with the powers a bit more and all of the different like builds that we can make. So I'll probably report back because I think I'm going to stick with this one a little bit longer. I also tried a demo for a game called Bloomtown: A Different Story. This one is one I've been watching on Twitter. I've been very excited about it because visually the pixel art is exactly like my vibe and style. It's really detail oriented, lots of like tiny objects and whimsy crammed into like every inch that they can of the environment. And I love that with pixel art, especially. The Steam description says Bloomtown: A Different Story is a narrative JRPG mixing turn based combat, monster taming, and a social RPG set in a seemingly pleasant 1960s Americana world. Join Emily and her group of friends to save their cozy town from the demonic creatures that live in the hearts of its residents. This one I feel like is if Mike and I made a game together, because 50% of it is that like, hey, you have traits like charisma and guts and kindness, and you can like go around town and go to the gym and buy groceries and plant gardens and talk to people and like build up these traits. You can also choose to steal if you would like to. Instead of buying things, you could steal books or food. You can choose to not plant things. So there's this element of like choice and consequence that I think could be interesting. I just played the demo. It's not out yet, but so we don't know how deep it'll go, but I think it could be interesting. But amidst this like social sim, you have sort of what their equivalent of like, what is it in Stranger Things, the upside down. They kind of have this demonic upside down that you encounter as a kid as you're looking for a lost friend. And this upside down, it's like satanic rituals, demons, like blood. It was more out there than I was expecting, and it was pretty cool. And you're basically trying to save the town from that. And in the process of doing that, you actually create a deal with Lucifer, the devil. So the demo really introduces
Love
a
that
lot.
man.
Yeah,
Yep.
seems like a nice enough guy.
Friend of the show.
Friend of the
Yeah,
show.
friend of the show,
Saint
We'll have him
Lucifer.
on sometime.
I will admit some of the spots the dialogue was a little bit roughly written. Like I feel like it maybe could do with like a nice pass on some of the dialogue exchanges. It felt a little bit blunt in a way that didn't feel like a character bluntness. It felt like the writing was a bit blunt. But I think the framework and the foundation is interesting enough that I really am excited to see more. I don't know if it's because of my own lack of exploring the demo or what. I didn't get any of the monster taming elements. I don't know if it was in there. The RPG stuff felt very standard, very turn-based RPG. You kind of, if you've played one, you know what it is. So I didn't do anything totally different there. So I can't speak to any of like the blend of monster taming with all of that, but really interesting. And the free demo is available still on Steam if you want to give it a try. And then just the last one that we haven't talked about yet is Sky Children of the Light, which is from that game company, which is like a personal favorite studio of mine. They made Journey, which is like one of my all-time favorite games ever. Sky Children of the Light is currently free in early access on Steam, but it's been out on mobile, and I don't know if it's been out on any
It
other
hit
platform.
PS5. I know.
PS5. There it goes. Yeah. It's free. The early access is the entire game. From my understanding, they're staying in early access for now, and then like anything beyond that that you want to purchase is like the skins and like outfit stuff. So if you want to play it, you can just hop in right now. I didn't like playing it on mobile because for me it felt like it needed to be played on a bigger screen, and I
Yeah,
didn't
it
like
definitely
having to
does.
control on the phone. But essentially it's kind of like Journey but MMO style. You're exploring these different regions, you're collecting memories of spirits and using that to progress further towards this beam of light that's off in the distance, and it's just beautiful. Like if you like awe-inspiring vistas, emotional like orchestral music, just friendly sort of environments where like the emotes that you use are like hold hands, like cheer on. It's just
Hell
the
yeah.
kindest sort of place. I would highly recommend checking it out, and it's free, so it's like you're not losing anything. So
I'm
yeah,
hoping
that's
Hold
what I
Hands
played.
will be the new pet dog.
Oh
Yeah.
my gosh,
You
right?
know,
That's
it's like,
what
why
I
can't we
was
hold hands in more
thinking.
games?
Oh, it's so good. Yeah, so I thought it was very, very cute. Yeah, anyone else want to add anything before we wrap up?
Nope.
No blood carcass, no.
I will say Barbatine is also on my list. I'll drop a link in our chat. Barbatine
Okay,
looks
I love
great.
it.
Came out recently. Janet, I think during your
Yep.
chaotic stream of trying to replicate all of our vibes. There you go. You got the brain.
Yeah,
You should
yeah.
play.
I did click on the what is it called? Bad flesh?
Yeah, Bad
Yeah.
Flesh.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I ate the bad
yeah, you're
flesh, I
good.
guess. My
Wow.
brain is rotted.
Your brain
It's
is
it's all it's bad now.
Nah.
I did the best I
I
could.
Bad
highly
Flesh?
recommend, and this is like not being like not playing up character. Faith the Unholy Trinity is like a fantastic
Yes.
horror experience. I think you should
Ugh.
check out.
I totally agree.
Jenny, don't do it. Don't make me play this game.
No,
Faith the
it's
Unholy
so
Trinity is a
good.
groundbreaking horror experience. It is phenomenal.
I got thrown into Fate. Okay, so there's this event that happens around the Portland Retro Game Expo every year, and there was a live stream sort of like panel that they had, and I was one of the panelists, and they were like, "All right, we're just going to give you a horror game, and you just get to play it." And so I went and
That's
I
awesome.
played Faith, and it was outstanding. I had the best time.
Working on new content. Very excited.
I'm gonna have to do
Yes.
that.
Oh my gosh. All
Also in
right,
the video
well,
of Bloomtown that you like
Oh, yeah.
shouted out, Jenny. There's a picture or like a still of like there's like a kid running and he's got their arms in the air and they're chasing after a goose. And that's just
Yeah.
delightful. So
it's just
yeah.
so cute.
High hopes. I hope they sand out some of the rough edges. But
Me
similar to
too.
Eastward, according to Steam, which granted, Steam will just pick a game I own and they're like, this is like that game. And I'm
This
like,
is
is
like
it?
it. I'm
This
like,
time I actually
okay,
think it is
sure.
probably like that game because they're both RPGs, but you know.
Yeah. Yeah, me too. I have high hopes for this one. So that is, I believe, the end of this week's council. You can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Google Podcasts until April. And the Indie Council has its own socials at Indie Council __ on Twitter.
Yep.
And at Indie Council everywhere else.
Yes, at Indie Council. What I don't know. I never remember if I put the in there.
You just buy
I-
indiecouncil.com and just call it a
Yeah,
day.
just call it. Yeah.
Well, we do have
just
a
get in
website
there.
actually. We have let me
Do we?
grab
Do
that.
we?
Yeah, we
have,
do.
like a landing page.
Yeah. We well like it's a landing page. Yeah, the indiecouncil.card, but card was with 2 R's.
Oh, that.
.co.
Got it.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's mostly just like a link out to socials and everything. But
Awesome.
yeah, I guess we can get indiecouncil.com if it's available. We can buy that. I've been buying a lot of URLs. It's the Indie Council everywhere else.
At the,
Awesome.
we've got to put the in there. Very important.
Yeah,
we
and I
got to
wanted
do
the in the other one, but like the Indie
Yeah.
Council on Twitter is taken.
It's
Because everything else is the Indie Council. It's Indie Council
Yeah.
underscore, but yeah.
Shout out to a friend of the show, Brendan Groom from Pass the Controller. He recently bought playmoreindies.com, and I'm very jealous that I didn't think about that sooner.
yeah, that's great.
That's really smart. All right. Well, that is the end of this week's council. Thank you to everyone for joining us. This session is closed. Go play some indies.